been feeling blue. My money is too. Shawty act rude till she seen it too. I've been feeling blue.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of What the Dealio. I am Siano, the founder and CEO of the SABRE companies. All of that. And SBX is a part of that with my partner, Mike Steinberg, to the right of me.
What's up, everyone? Mike Steinberg, Hedgestone Business Advisors. Today we have the most special guest, Stu Fagen. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Stewie!
Wow. Thanks for having me. I'm a little bit intimidated here with all these lights and cameras. I feel like I should be crooning or something, like fly me to the moon or something.
I think to kind of tee up this episode, I have to give Stu's intro. So the reason that I'm sitting here today is because of this man. After losing my mom, I really had no clue what I was going to do with the rest of my life, so to speak. And my good friend, Stu's brother, Brian Fagen, came into my living room in the city in my apartment and said, does anybody want to get involved in commercial real estate? My brother is doing really well at a company out in Long Island and blah, 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 blah. And I turned and looked at him and said, I have to move out of the city and move back to Long Island, but this sounds like a great opportunity. I'd like to explore it. And here we are today, Stu.
True story.
Crazy story.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
It is. Well, thank you for having me. I think it's a long time coming, both the planning of this as well as the SBX brand. And I'm thankful to both of you for the opportunity.
Amazing. So let's start from the beginning.
Oh, God.
How did Stu Fagen get into commercial real estate?
You know, I grew up in Dix Hills. And
we all grew up in Dix Hills.
Well, I didn't even know that. Really?
That's the point. And it seems like there's a lot of connections to commercial real estate that go back to Dix Hills. It's kind of like, you know, that thing with
Kevin Bacon?
Kevin Bacon, yeah, same thing.
It's 7 degrees. Or is it 6 minute abs? Sorry, I digress.
So, yeah, I was around it. And right out of college, I got my first job leasing apartments in the city. Not many people know that. I worked for a small company called Thompson Kane. And coincidentally, another friend from Dix Hills, Robert Hankin, managed the office, so he gave me the opportunity. So I walked the streets of the city for a few years, maybe 2 years. First deal was with a friend of a friend who played basketball for University of Michigan. First client, first deal. And he was on the Fab Five, but unfortunately he was like 8 or 9.
Wow. Still a good ball player.
So, yeah, good ball player. All Michigan. All American Michigan.
By the way, do you know Mike's a good ball player? Did you know
I had no idea.
Okay, all right. We'll get into that later.
We'll have to take it to the streets later. Because I'm ready. I'm
ready too. I got the ball in the car.
May not look
always
it,
ready.
but I am ready.
I got my shoes in the car.
So, yeah, I rented him a one-bedroom apartment on the Upper East Side. I believe the building was called the Colonnade or something, 81st and 1st, something like that. Yeah, and so did that for a little while. And then I always wanted to be in commercial. And my mom shows me this New York Times ad of this company in Great Neck hiring. And so I call the number. Long story short, I get the job. And it's an entry level. Gould Investors, that's a division of Gould Investors doing store leasing. And so I started there. And it was back before, you know, we had CoStar and all the other, you know, bells and whistles. We had a dial in AOL in my office, and I was supposed to get exactly. I heard that all day long.
Wow.
And I was getting the listings, and I was organizing, you know, just a spreadsheet. And it was nonsense. But I learned the business. They also owned a portfolio of shopping centers in the Midwest.
Still do.
They still do.
And they're a client of yours.
And I still represent them to this day. And that was about 30 years ago, 27 years ago maybe. So, yeah, and then I started to do more commercial and went over to Breslin Realty. and I'm fast forwarding a lot of things. And I had the great pleasure of learning from one of the best in the business, and Jay has as well, Wilbur Breslin, and of course his son Kenny Breslin. We did a bunch together, and I was just thrown right in, working on major accounts, and one of them being the Walmart account, among others, Commerce Bank, Verizon, I mean, you name it, at the time, Rockaway Betting, and so that was probably 7 or 8 years, and then went off on my own. I had a dear friend at the time, introduced me to Alan Rosenberg, who is principal of Al Rose Group, and I was his director of acquisitions for 3 years, where we did some nice things together. And Alan was what I call a cowboy, and I would sit in a car with him looking at a site. In fact, we did a deal right down the road over here. It's currently the bagel place. It was a gas station.
Brendels.
Yeah, correct.
It was
Right,
gas station.
right across from the Walden Mall.
Bought that from Cumberland Farms, and just he was a great analyzer, and we'd sit in a parking lot with a napkin, and we just scribble the numbers, and he'd say, "Okay, it works. Let's get it."
It's awesome because I feel like, Mike, you're very similar, where you could look at a deal, do the quick math, understand kind of how to get from A to Z in concept, but a lot of people don't necessarily, in our world, I think, as brokers. It's funny, when I went to CBRE, when I left Breslin and went to CBRE, I met the gentleman, Dugan, I forget his first name.
Kevin?
No. Older gentleman, retired. He was an office broker, which was the first time that I really met like an office broker. I was always in the retail space. And his first name's escaping me. It'll come to me. But he talked to me in my interview about the concept of brokers being finders, minders, and grinders. And he said, it's very rare that a broker is all three. And we typically try to put people together that are finders, minders, and grinders, and that's how we put a team together. And I'm like, I've always been an independent broker that lands my own business, services the business, executes, and moves on. So hearing that concept was super interesting to me. It was the first time. And Alan Rosenberg, tying it back to Alan, from a deal perspective, investor, developer standpoint, my perception was able to really do all three of the things with the right people around him, like yourself, teeing up deals,
right,
which is huge, obviously, right? Like your role, he couldn't execute and do what he does best if it wasn't for somebody like you.
Yeah, and like with anything, it's all the team, and all the pieces of the puzzle have to be clicking.
Yeah.
To make a reference to sports, I know I follow a lot of college sports. Mike Krzyzewski always talks about the team being like the hand, and like if you're not like punching together, you're either not going to achieve success or someone's going to get hurt. Like if you're punching like this, you might knock someone out, but you also might break a finger.
You better go for the eyes.
I love that. You guys are coming up with some good analogies right here.
Right?
I like that. That was really good.
I like that.
So, Mike, you to tie this all together, Stu and I partnered with you to create SBX, the business brokerage division of SABRE. Stu and I are together. I'm in the business 22 going on 23 years. We've worked together for 23 years. And sitting here is kind of surreal for me right now because it's really cool, all the history Stu and I have. And then to be partnered with you and Hedgestone and growing everything that we do and learning new things from you along the way. What is your take on how commercial real estate brokerage ties into the business brokerage world, and maybe some insights on why we came your way and what we're doing together?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much synergy. All these landlords that own all these shopping centers, they all have business owners that pay them that's how they make their money. The land, they get the rent. So a lot of the times, these landlords, when the business owners are going out, you guys will know first, right? So now, since you have this other arm of SBX, before they go out, we can have a conversation with those business owners, and we can help them sell their business instead of them going out of business. Try to get them anything, any type of key money. So that's one way of doing it. But I wanted to just point one thing out about, you said you used to write things on napkins, and, there was just AOL back in the day. I like to use that in my business too. Everyone makes fun of me because I have a pad and a pen and a paper, but I think that's really important to keep the old school habits, right?
Yeah.
And also adapt with the new school stuff. What's your thought on when you do business? Do you still write everything on a notebook? You still keep those same the mythologies?
I do take notes in a notebook, but I'm also very analytical with like redundancy. I want to know that I'll have it on my computer, and I'll have it on my phone, I'll have it on my iPad, I'll have it here in New York. So I've been shying away from handwritten, like taking my notes on a property and putting it there. I usually go to my notes section on my iPhone or on my iPad, and I put it there. So then it's on my computer later, and it's able to be cut and pasted into an email, the facts on a site or the facts on a deal.
Sure.
But I still do like write shit down. But I think that's a matter of habit.
That's
I've
habit.
been doing it for so long.
It's a great thing that you pointed out, because Stu, when you were talking about like the early things that you were doing at Gould, you're like, and other types of BS like that. Mm-hmm. I was thinking not BS actually, because if you didn't learn those things, then like you wouldn't really be where you are today, and you wouldn't have the same success and all those things. The same way that the things I always tell younger people, or people of all ages that have never owned a business or never grown something from scratch, that you have to do tasks that you don't want to do. Yeah. Like in a restaurant, you have to be the chef and the main waiter and the dishwasher and all of those things. And you start to learn as you get older and wiser and grow as a business person, that if you're doing all of those things and you're many years into your business, you're actually now holding the business back. And our goal as entrepreneurs is to essentially start to fire yourselves, from a lot of the roles that you used to have to play in the business, and that's how everything grows.
Yeah, instead of working in the business, you should be working on the business. You should replace those chefs with real chefs. In my business and in SBX as well, we should hire people for our weaknesses. Like, I'm not a good organizational guy, so I hired a COO to basically handle all the back end. That's what I'm learning through all these small businesses is hire your weaknesses, do what you're good at, and just stay pinpoint focused. But I had a question for both of you. So what do you think is a more effective way of getting a listing? Not getting a listing, but say you have a big account like Walmart. Do you like driving around and looking at buildings that look like they're going out? Is that more effective than just going online, you think?
Yeah, there's no replacement from hitting the pavements. And even if, let's say I'm taking a ride out east, I'm not going to we always say we take the real estate road. We don't just get on the LIE and go. Because just driving a street in general will spark ideas that, hey, maybe I was on this 5 years ago, and maybe I could reach out again and see if now is the time. Maybe he's ready to retire and sell, or whatever it may be. So I think that one can't be done independently of the other. They have to be done together. Because after you do the road work, then you go back to the computer and you just check the facts. And, okay, the site's 10 acres, it's this, it's that, whatever.
I love that.
Yeah, I would jump in and also say that most people don't realize, but when you're talking about a company like a Walmart, or you're talking about a company like a Starbucks, there's a master plan strategy that is ironclad. And then once the strategy is in place, obviously it's a living, growing thing that's going to change and continue to adapt into something else, because when you open a store, you get more data on that store, and it's going to impact the rest of the strategy and the cannibalization of the other surrounding stores. But it's not a random thing, right? So it's not like we're just driving for those types of companies and looking at random buildings that are dark and we could just put a Walmart in, right?
Sure.
It's basically, okay, we understand that Long Island is 100 plus miles in length. There's 2 counties. There's 2.8 million people, 1.3 million in Suffolk, 1.5 million in Nassau. And as a result, there's a formula of how many Walmarts we can place, or a formula of how many Starbucks we can place. And we developed the Starbucks strategy and executed it for 18 years. And I led that, and we've done over, just shy of probably 200 Starbucks at SABRE over those 18 years between New York and New Jersey. And it's not a result of people just sending you sites and vacant storefronts with signs in the windows. It's, we know exactly where we need to place one, and we spend years executing that strategy. So it's not at random.
It's a science.
It's an absolute science. And the brokers who are just putting signs up in a window and waiting for people to call don't do what we do for a living.
No. It's everything strategic, and it's like business brokering, A lot of these old school business brokers, they post their listings on Craigslist, and which is great, Facebook, but they're not going out there and they're not calling their competitors. They're not going out there. They're not calling other business owners to expand. You got to have an inbound and an outbound force.
Yeah.
That's what I'm learning.
So it's one of Stu's biggest strengths, which is probably the most difficult thing to do in commercial real estate, is assembling dirt for larger development projects. Stu, walk us through when you see something that has potential. Walk us through how you assemble properties with hard corners and traffic signals, and how you figure out what types of tenants could potentially work based on the footprint of the building that could be built as of right, or the permitting process and how to go in for variances so you can build larger than as of right, et cetera.
Yeah, well, it's all a matter of your network and knowing who the right people are for the right job. I'll give you an example. When I was at Allen Rosenberg, we took down a dilapidated food town in Oceanside, and it was vacant for 1 million years. And the reason, everything on Long Island or everything in real estate, I think, has a reason. When you see great real estate and it's being underutilized, there's a reason for that. And in this case, it was a very, very stubborn owner that didn't get along with the brokerage community, didn't get along with anybody. But, we were able to get him to transact. And we didn't have a tenant in mind at the time, but we got into contract and eventually closed on the property. There was a little sliver that he didn't own next to it, and we got that piece. And then, one day, so we closed. And funny story that when we got to the closing table, the personalities didn't really get along so well. And Alan and I went to Manhattan in the garment district. And Alan and I excuse ourselves from the closing table and go into the next room. And we're looking out the window, just shaking our heads. And just straight across the street, just looking what the heck are we doing here? What is it? This guy's such a, whatever. And then all of a sudden, we see someone across the way getting undressed. Naked. Totally naked. Okay? And Alan and I look at each other all right, this is going to turn out good. This is going to turn out good. That's just a sign. It's as the Yiddish would say, it's beshert. It's meant to be. So we get back in the closing table, we close the deal, and then we go on our merry way. So knock, knock, knock. I get a call from Ed Glacken, with, at the time, King Cullen, Wild by Nature, and he wants to put a store here. So he wants to knock down the building. He wants us to knock down the building, and he wants to put it further back on the lot, so he's got a front field parking. Back then, the food town was right up on Long Beach Road. And we're like, if you want to do that, that's on you. We're not, spending that kind of money to knock down the building. It's a perfectly good building. So this goes back and forth for months. And then on a Sunday night, I'm barbecuing, And I just, out of the blue, felt like calling Alan, and I forget what the question was I had to ask him, but I had to ask him a question. And I said, Alan, what's cooking? And he's like, it's funny you should say that. So what do you mean? He goes, Oceanside is cooking. I said, what? He says, don't you have News 12 Long Island? I'm like, no, I have Verizon. I don't have News 12. He's like, well, if you had News 12, you'd know that the building's on fire right now. I said, get the hell out of here.
Wow.
And I'm like smiling, like, yay, someone freaking burned this thing down.
Wow.
And they burned it down. And again, the long story short, that's now a Wild by Nature. And we ended up buying the piece next door that was also burnt down in the fire, and we put a Walgreens there.
First off, there's so much to unpack there, A. And B, I have so many comments that I want to make that I'm refraining from making.
I have a comment, but I can't make it.
And it's probably the same comment.
Okay, let me address the comments, okay? So, a couple weeks later, we get a call from the cops, the Popo, and they say they got the guys.
By the way, it's over 7 years, so you can go into the whole story.
They say we got the guys. So what do you mean you got the guys? The kids who started the fire in the food town. Really? Yeah, they were just fooling around. They broke into the building, and they lit a fire in one of the trash cans, and burned down the building. So, well, that's a relief. So meanwhile...
By the way, they made us a lot of money, right? You're like, who are they, and where can I send them a gift?
Could I pay for their bar mitzvah or something?
Right? You had this problem that, all of a sudden was solved.
And at the...
That's
before,
true.
Before
They really did that?
Yeah, and before this call, I was getting calls from attorneys. They were subpoenaing me to testify on how I locked the building last time I showed it.
Wow.
And it was locked. I mean, we didn't have cameras there back then, but it was a locked building, and they fucking broke into it. But
and that happens in our business.
It happens. I mean, anytime there's a vacant building, there's a good chance that you're gonna get a surprise when you walk in, especially when it's vacant for that long.
Yeah.
And Jay and I recently had this conversation.
Yeah, that's why I just said it. We just had this conversation, and I was walking into a building that we represent, and the door was wide open when I showed up for the showing, and there were shopping carts, on the side of the building, so there was definitely some activity there, and I'm like...
And it wasn't shopping.
Yeah, so I just, there was a back room in the building that I chose not to go into for obvious reasons, but hopefully we resolved that issue. You and I have not discussed that. But.
I let the powers that be know, and
Good.
asked if I should do anything, and he said no.
All right.
Got it.
Yeah, I had a surprise.
Is it locked? We think it's locked?
We think it is.
Okay, good. We should probably check. So, yeah, you were saying, Mike? Sorry.
Do you guys know the Manor East building in Massapequa that was vacant for a long time?
Catering hall.
Yeah, catering hall.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, same thing. I went in there, and a surprise hit me. I literally walked in, I went upstairs, and there was a guy just laying like this on the floor. I'm like, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, it's actually pretty common.
Yeah,
you have to be careful, and at least as a more experienced person, I actually said to the person that I was with showing the building, I said, let's just stay on this side of the building. Let's be smart. I don't think we need to risk our lives to go check that back room, and there's really not much to see in there. And, it's actually just part of the business.
Yep.
Yeah. But coincidental things like that, like even in my short career, like so many signs of things happen, and it just happens, It's just I love that about this business.
So let's talk about, Stu. What do you think is the most creative? Well, actually, let's go back to that deal, because my brain is obviously thinking about what transpired, and I know what transpired, and I know how to make it transpire. But when you assembled that property with Alan, and King Cullen was interested, and there was a food town building on the front of the property, we know in retail that front field parking is more valuable.
Yeah.
So did Ed Glacken. So does Ed Glacken. So the building went away through, a surprise event. And you were able to put how many square feet together on the property when you were putting the new building up? I know ultimately who leased it, but
Yeah,
do you recall-ish?
the new building.
Wild by Nature was 16,000.
I think it was bigger. I think it was like
20.
18 and then a mezzanine.
Okay.
So it's probably a GLA of close to like 30 some odd thousand
And
square
you did
feet.
a Commerce Bank on a pad?
No, that was
Or
the
was it
adjacent parcel.
Did you do that deal?
No, I
Okay.
did not do that one. But the Walgreens we did adjacent to it, where the
So it was a Wild by Nature and a Walgreens. And a Walgreens is typically 16,000 square feet
with a drive-through. Yeah.
with a drive-through. Yeah. So you fit both of those on, and it was a ground lease or build to suit.
Good question. I'm pretty sure it was a build-to-suit.
Okay. So
big rent.
what is the difference? What's a ground lease and what's a build to
Well,
suit?
a
Because
ground
people
lease-
watching this
Good
have no
question.
idea what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
a ground lease is just, paying rent for the dirt, and then the leaseholder takes it from there. They get the entitlements, they build the building, they're paying the taxes directly to the municipalities. And on a build-to-suit, you're getting what's typically a work letter of what their requirements are, down to like the hardware on the doors. I mean, it's really in depth, and you're building it. So usually the rent's a lot more money on a build to suit. And
How long are the ground leases usually?
at the company like that? The minimum of 15 years, and they could be longer depending on who the tenant is.
So in that case, what would have been more advantageous to the owner of the dirt? A ground lease or a build to suit? Well, in a perfect world, and I'm not just saying this deal, in a perfect world, if I own a bunch of acreage, what's my preference as an owner?
You want a ground lease, especially if you're a not so schooled real estate owner. Say
Owner,
you
developer?
inherited land or something, and you didn't want to sell because of tax reasons or whatever. You'd want a ground lease. You'd want a ground lease and just.
So the tenant then is responsible for all the improvements. Typically though, there is a pad-ready ground lease.
Yeah, sometimes they'll require you to bring the utilities X amount of feet from the building
And stub the
utilities. Yeah, and they'll usually tell you, I want a 4-inch water line, a 2-inch gas, whatever those particulars are.
very common in the restaurant, full-size restaurant space.
Yeah, and they'll even get into the gallonage, like it's got to flow X amount of gallons, per minute or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
I have a question. You know the Target up here with the Chick-fil-A?
Very well. We were looking at acquiring the Chick-fil-A dirt from Target,
Yep.
which didn't happen, obviously.
So that used to be the Huntington Townhouse. I was bar mitzvah there. My dad
Lotus
was bar
Silver's
mitzvah
Huntington Townhouse.
there. So you know.
Of course.
But
Know every inch of Long Island, bro.
My
think
baseball
about
dinners
that
there.
deal.
There you
Think
go.
about that's a crazy
Breslin was
deal.
involved in that.
What,
deal.
Was he?
what people don't know about that deal is that Lowe's Home Improvement had bought
man.
it from Rona Silver and closed on it without any contingencies, because clearly it's a catering hall. They had ongoing business, and the only way that she would sell is if someone transacted quickly. I don't know if that was 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but whatever it is, it was a quick.
By the way, she owed a lot of money on. She was very underwater on her business, and that's why she was kind of, I think, forced to make some quick decisions. And part of Stu's story is exactly what you shouldn't do on Long Island. But continue.
Yeah, and so I have no idea why Lowe's never went forward with it, but the bottom line is they didn't, and lost a ton of money by selling it to Target because Target wasn't paying the
It
premium.
was a $70 million or something deal like that, right? Do you remember?
I don't remember the numbers, but I'm sure there could have been some.
The acquisition
sandwich
was
people.
not
I don't
that
think it was that,
much
yeah.
money, and it was Wade Laufenberg, and Wade ultimately lost his job as a result of that deal. He's a great swimmer, though. So yeah, I think it's interesting because this is something that is interesting for anybody that's in the real estate business. Is if you talk about any major deal on Long Island, and in a lot of cases not so major deals, Stu and or I can tell you probably the story from start to finish on each of those deals, or at least portions of the story. And you know, we've grown our business off Long Island. SABRE literally only transacted in Long Island for the first, let's call it 7-8 years of the business. I mean, grew into New York Metro over those years a little bit, but now has essentially in the last 12 months transacted in 42 states. And I barely know what's going on in Long Island. And we have, you know, talk about letting go of the vine and expanding and being able to, you know, fire yourself from the positions of chef and dishwasher, etc. You know, that's how we've grown, where Stu is working on Long Island a lot more than I am. And there are teams that do each thing, but it's really important for me to stay up to speed on these things, but I'm not, you know, involved in the day-to-day that I used to be in micro markets like Long Island, which in a lot of people's minds would be considered a big territory. But once you start to grow over the country, it becomes pretty small.
So let's talk about SBX.
Let's do it.
So SBX, you have a new arm. It's a business brokerage arm.
Correct.
We're going after all full-service businesses, restaurants, laundromats, liquor stores, supermarkets, car washes, hotels, the list goes on. We collabed because there's just so much synergy between all of us. You know, I just want everyone to know, like, you know, let's talk about our goals with SBX.
Yeah, let's do it. So, you know, Mike and I have very similar backgrounds. We have many mutual friends. I should say the three of us, but you know, Mike and I kept talking about the opportunity in business brokerage, and you know, Stu, Mike, and I kept talking about how when we are speaking with landlords of shopping centers and they give us information on a business is not doing well, or somebody's looking to get out of the business, there's a death in the family, a divorce, all of those things, we're just, as retail leasing brokers, we're just waiting for that company to leave.
Yeah. Call me when you get the space back would
Correct.
be the response.
Wow.
You know, a Kimco would call you, or one of the other major landlords on Long Island and say, hey, I got this restaurant in XYZ that might be coming available. The guy's late on his rent. Let me know if you have anybody. That would be the call.
Now, let's say the restaurant is not doing that well, but the location is gold. So an operator may pay, you know, a few $100,000 for that location. Mm-hmm. You know, we make 10 to 12% commissions on that. So why are we going to pass that opportunity up and not do anything with it? So that's why, you know, I think we got together, because there's just so many, you know, and then you heard about the Dick's Hills car wash, and that was a friend of yours, and I sold it to him, and there's just too much business out there. And
yeah, there's so much overlap, and you know, it also, listen, we all like helping people, and we help each other. We are super collaborative, and we want, you know, people don't stop to think about the fact that, you know, the business owners of these places are humans, and they feed their families and provide for their families through these businesses, right? So when you hear about somebody that has, you know, a reason that they need to sell, it's really comforting if you're able to help them, right? And not just the same way that we were just not thinking about how to help them and how to sell their business. We were never trained that there was even an opportunity there. And the minute that we started to pay attention to it, you know, we became obsessed with the opportunity to really help these people and help, you know, the future generations of their families.
Yeah, and with the popularity now of franchise stores, we do a lot of franchise expansion. And every franchisee has an exit strategy. Whether it's, you know what, I want to scale to 4 locations and then I want to sell, or I want to 12, you know, whatever it is. There's always an event time certain that they want to exit. So now we have the ability and the tools to do that and fulfill that for our clients.
It's a huge arm right there.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I will say, you know, I want to make it a point right now to say that the business brokerage opportunity for people of all ages is an unbelievable one. And there is so much business, to your point always, Mike. There are so many businesses for sale. There are so many real estate agents, primarily residential real estate agents, but there are a lot of commercial real estate agents as well. And commercial is really challenging to make a living and get up and running. And, you know, it took me many years of really working my ass off to even make money in commercial real estate brokerage. And Mike, you have so many success cases with people that have made money in such a short period of time, which is basically impossible in commercial real estate brokerage. So I just want to underline and emphasize that we are growing our teams, and we need young people that are driven, that want to help others and make deals and, you know, grow with us.
It's all about helping others. When I started, I always thought about dollars, but at the point in my career, I'm always thinking about how to change lives.
Yeah.
Stu, any closing thoughts?
Oh, closing thoughts. I think you guys hit everything. But yeah, just looking forward to what the future holds for us as a group, you know?
Absolutely.
I'd like to take the last 15 seconds to thank you for the impact you've made on my life and picking me up when I was down, and I'm happy to reciprocate because we do that for each other, and I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And thank you both.
And it goes way beyond that, too. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the fitness aspects of things, but I guess there's always something to be left on the table.
That's episode 2 of the Stu Fagen What the Dealio podcast. We hope you enjoyed. You got some tips, value. Please share this if you did. Later.